Good afternoon.
Is he right?
It's a bit severe, but I am going to be voting against these proposals when they are debated at last next week. I think they are misjudged. I can't understand the logic of saying to people you can go out for parties, but you can't go to the office to work with your colleagues. And as far as we can tell, because it's early days for the scientific evidence to build up, but as far as we can tell, the vaccines are going to work against this new variant just as they've been working very well against the old variants. And so you're very unlikely, if vaccinated, to get a serious case where you needed hospital treatment. And that's the important thing. We obviously don't want a new wave of seriously ill people needing to go to hospital.
There's a lot of theories as to how this press conference yesterday came around. It was on, it was off, it was on, it was then suddenly, I think around about four-ish, there's going to be a press conference. And then, of course, we get all this new information. You're familiar with the dead cat theory, John Redwood. Is there anything in that, do you think? A nice, if you like, distraction from Partygate and all sorts of other things?
Yeah, I understand the dead cat theory, rather unpleasantly phrased.
True.
I don't think this is that, because first of all, it's even more unpopular than the thing they were trying to replace. And secondly, I think the origin of this is very simple. I think we have some extremely cautious scientific and medical advisors at the Department of Health. We have executives running the health service who are very cautious about what the health service can actually manage, despite all the extra money going in. And they lobbied the Secretary of State for Health, who successfully lobbied the Prime Minister. I think the reason why it was on and off was they were clearly having an argument, because presumably the Chancellor of the Exchequer was there saying this is going to do a lot of economic damage. Is it worth it? And the Prime Minister came up with this compromise package. I think it was ill-judged. And what I don't like is this business where the Prime Minister is flanked by medical and scientific advisors, but doesn't have any economic advisors with him. If they're going to have the advisors as part of the presentational team, you need a balanced presentation, and you need to say that you've also taken part of the decision with prosperity in mind,
Well, absolutely crucial, one would have thought. I mean, in the pie chart of people you need to speak to, economic advice would be... it's not as if we don't have the evidence for this, is it? Economic advice would be absolutely forefront of those people.
Well, very crucial. And there are less damaging and more damaging ways of doing these kind of things. And did they have a proper debate about that? Is it actually less damaging to disrupt business and to allow people greater social freedom? I'm not sure that is the best answer economically.
What do you think's going on here then, John? I mean, is this just a case of a Prime Minister being careful? Does he believe that if he plays to this room, there's a more to be had from playing to that than there is to the likes of you or me or our listeners who won't be very supportive of what they heard yesterday? What do you think his raison d'etre is here?
Well, I think this is a Prime Minister who's desperately trying to do the right thing, who's trying to chair departments who are at war with one another. And there needs to be some healthy tension between departments, and there's clearly been a lot of tension between Treasury and economic departments on the one hand, saying, quite rightly, all of these measures are going to have a cost in jobs and incomes and maybe health effects on the people who are adversely affected. And the health people who are being ultra cautious, saying we're not sure the health service can manage, and we are worried that this new variant could be worse than we think and could then take off. And he's trying to find a balancing point. But I think on this occasion, he hasn't found the right balancing point. And what he's got to realize is that it's not a good look if when we get to the debate and the vote next week, after the law has come in, incidentally, a large number of Conservative MPs express grave reservations and vote against. He's got to persuade us.
And it's quite tricky to take the country with you after recent events. I mean, if people were getting fined 10,000 quid for looking at somebody in the wrong postcode, and now we understand a big old knees up took place in Downing Street. It's quite hard to tell people to behave and follow the rules when the very people at Number 10 that made those rules don't follow them themselves.
Yeah, and some of us are very angry about that.
Indeed.
But we need, first of all, to get the results of the inquiry, because the Prime Minister assures us he didn't organise a party and didn't go to a party. It appears that a lot of civil servants and senior advisors maybe had a party in Downing Street. That is the allegation. The sooner the Cabinet Secretary tells us whether that's true or false, the better. I mean, the Cabinet Secretary should know, because these are civil servants we're talking about.
And there are lists of people who come to Downing Street, of course.
In a very prestigious and responsible set of positions. If by any chance the civil service did have a party for people who had Downing Street passes, who didn't need therefore to get through security, so it wasn't obvious to anyone else, then the Prime Minister has to immediately take appropriate disciplinary action, because that is completely unacceptable. These are the people who put all these rules on us.
Indeed.
And those of us who didn't want the rules have had to go along with them. That's the democratic system.
Well, one of the questions, of course, that we're looking at, as we always do, John Redwood, is whether the rules would get any tougher. Let's just have a little listen, John, if you don't mind, to that moment where Boris Johnson talked about mandatory vaccines.
I want to be absolutely clear with you. I don't believe we can keep going indefinitely with non-pharmaceutical interventions. I mean restrictions on people's way of life, where just because a substantial proportion of the population still, sadly, has not got vaccinated. And I think we're going to need to have a national conversation about the way forward and the other things that we can do to protect those who are hard to reach, who haven't got vaccinated for one reason or another, who may have medical reasons why they can't get vaccinated, other ways of protecting them.
What will be your contribution, John Redwood, to the national conversation?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's definitely no to compulsory vaccination for all people. I say that people now have choices, and I want to live in a free society where people responsibly exercise their choices. And so we can decide to get vaccinated, which seems to give us pretty good protection, so we can go about our normal business and we might only get a mild version of the disease. Or if we're really scared, we can stay at home ourselves and do much more online and agree with our employers' home working arrangements and all the rest of it. Or if we're not too worried about it all, we can just go about our business with or without the vaccine. Perfectly good choices. And I don't buy this line that we've got to make everybody take the vaccine so that everybody is safe. Every day you go out and you mix with people, as we like to do, you take a risk. You might catch something else that we haven't got a vaccine against, or they may inadvertently or deliberately harm you. You take a risk all the time to be a social being, but we are social beings.
You've been a Conservative MP for a long time. You've served in government under various leaders. Have you ever seen anything like what is going on now in Number 10, John?
Oh, I've often seen problems and mistakes in government. Yes, it goes with the piece. But I think there is a big issue at the moment about the relationship between the elected officials and the civil service, and the relationship between the two. And I think there is an issue about the management of staff at Downing Street, which the Prime Minister needs to get a grip on as quickly as possible. That is why he needs that urgent, truthful report from the Cabinet Secretary about the behaviour of all the officials in Downing Street. And if they have misbehaved in the way the press and others think they have, there have to be some big changes.
How many like-minded Conservatives are there, John, who would concur with what you've just said? Of course, the problem when it comes to a vote is that Labour are more than likely to vote with the government.
Well, I think the majority would agree with me on what I said about sorting out whatever happened to Downing Street and making personnel changes where necessary. We don't know yet on the vote. I mean, I'm not running a rebellion or whipping the vote. I'm just one MP who has my own views. But I detected yesterday in Parliament a distinct change of mood by a lot of MPs who've been completely loyal on all these issues up to this point.
Yeah, the Health Secretary getting heckled yesterday.
So I'm expecting
heckled in the chamber yesterday.
Sorry?
The Health Secretary getting heckled in the chamber yesterday.
Yeah, well, people are really angry. They think the government's making a big mistake. They don't want to vote for it. So it looks as if there's going to be a big Conservative vote against. Of course, they can have a coalition with Labour and the SNP over this, as they have done for quite a long time, and they will win the vote because they'll have all those opposition votes. But I think when you get up to the point where maybe 100 or more of your own party really cannot live with the policy, you need to rethink it. It's as simple as that.